So a couple weeks ago, did this one, and I told him that these compressors usually fail, especially when you haven't driven them in 2 or 3 years. I think he said it was down for like 2 years. The seals would dry out, and then sometimes it would not leak under vacuum, won't leak under pressure, won't leak while operating, but later on it will leak. And that's exactly what happened. So technician I was working with, who's a retired mechanic, I left him. He was going to drive back and look for leaks, and he used my black light. I gave him one of my black lights, and of course he says, oh, it's all green around the seals of the old compressor. And I go, exactly what I told the customer what was going to happen, because I've seen it happen 10,000 times. But found one more leak that this must have hit. He went up to Stockton, you know, it gets 100 and some degrees up there, so this must have been hitting near 400 psi, and it's failed right down here. Let's see if we could get some come on, focus, come on Apple, you can do it. Right. Well, you don't see the bubbles now. You're making me a liar. Let's get our big blue, put some more back on here. Now, he put in 175 psi a couple days ago. I don't have any pressure in there yet, you see that? So there's not going to be, with that kind of leak, there's not going to be 150 psi. But the funny thing is, there's not dye everywhere. Check this out. What you see is, like, from the hands and everything like that, everything is clean. Oh, let me back out on focus. Basically, okay, you see all my dye spilled all over, but you see that everything else is pretty well clean. You'd think you'd see dye everywhere. So we have a failure at these goddamn I hate these retrofit fittings. These retrofit fittings that the EPA has required to do retrofits, which it was a good idea, but there is more leaks caused by the retrofit fittings than they were solved. Okay, so my fittings are open right now. They're not closed to the system. And I jumped it up to, it's supposed to be 175, because Larry worked on this, and just to test it, you see it's disconnected. For the last week or two, it's been going around with 175 psi in it, and usually when I get to it, I put my gauges up to 175. I got it to 178, and when I close the connections, it should be level. So since we see this leak on here, let's listen. Okay. I heard a little change. 144. I don't have this one on yet, but it was leaking out of there. So it's a really small leak. So we went from 175 to 144. So in a week or two, with that amount of bubbles, it went from 175 to 144. So I'm going to take care of this leak right now, and then I'll vacuum and charge it up and everything like that. But this is why, when you especially have old cars and you have time, he knows the customer is a personal friend and a contractor and multiple vehicles, so there was time involved in here. And this is why we went through the extra step again to charge it up with 175 psi of dry nitrogen, let it sit for a week. He drove it around a few times without air conditioning. It's not, well, it's getting hot now, but it gave it time to leak. But if Larry would have went around with bubbles like this, Larry would have found it possibly at that time, and then I wouldn't be going through this little hassle right now. But he was using the UV light, and because there was no dye leaking down there, he couldn't see dye. It would leak refrigerant, but it wouldn't leak, it leaks nitrogen at 175 psi right now. But it was the compressor that just blew out all the oil and the dye all around the compressor. So he went for the easy leak and he replaced the compressor, but he didn't go around with the bubbles and look for bubbles, or use an ultrasonic leak detector or a refrigerant leak detector. But he did the best he can with what he had, and I had suspicions, because I go, okay, we have a new compressor, so it should be 175, and I just proved it was not. It was 144. So I immediately, because I always do, every time I see retrofit fittings, this is the first thing I do, is I look for leaks, I pressure it up, dry nitrogen, and I look for leaks automatically at every retrofit fitting that was added on. Because when they're this old, they're always leaking. And because of the EPA requirement to put retrofit fittings on, the EPA has spewed more refrigerant into the air caused by the fittings that they required to go on here. All right, guys, I'll see you back after I fix this and charge it up. It's definitely not 175 PSI.